Tonight's guests are brothers who want to keep their identities anonymous. With that in mind, I'm just going to call them Carl and Billy. Carl and Billy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Vic.
Yep, thank you.
Well, it's great having you. Thank you for your time. Carl, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm actually a mechanic by trade, anything car related, painting them and all sorts of stuff. And I actually am married, have been for, I guess, about 10 years now. Have 2 kids. One of them is 6, little boy, and 12-year-old girl. Just a pretty straightforward, normal guy for the most part. I do, however, want to also mention that I spent a whole lot of time. Well, me and my brother, both of us grew up in the woods and in the country and stuff. So we're very aware of animals and stuff like that, especially me more so. I was the kind of kid that liked to always watch animal shows or read animal books and all sorts of stuff. We were always into catching snakes and you name it. We were outside doing it. So we're pretty aware of our surroundings in the woods and everything. I did want to make that very clear.
Well, thanks for putting that out there. So what you're saying is, for the people, the skeptics out there listening who are saying, oh, okay, these guys just saw a squirrel and mistook it for a Dogman, you're saying that they're full of it then?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say they must be. Billy, how about you?
Well, I actually work with my brother, so we do the same thing. And I am 33 years old, and I have a wife that I've been with for a very long time.
Wow, if you two guys wrench on cars and paint them, and you're both married and you have kids, you guys stay busy then.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, and thank goodness you told me about that, because next time I need a car painted, I know who to look up.
Yes, sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'd say. Carl, you were 9 or 10 years old when you had your encounter, but Billy was with you when it happened. Who's had a harder time dealing with that experience over the years, you or Billy?
I would probably say, just in my opinion, I would say me. For some reason, I guess, I don't know if it was because I was a little bit older than he was at the time, but I had a lot more nightmares and stuff more than he had. Let's put it that way.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think it was harder for you to deal with than for him?
I think it's probably more to do with me being older of us two, and I don't know if it was just because I felt like, I was responsible for him or what it was, but it's just always bothered me though.
Yeah, that would make sense. You felt a lot more responsibility to protect him, so it was kind of like a double whammy for you. Billy, have you and Carl been able to do things in the woods without trouble after having that experience, or do you two avoid the woods as much as possible?
Oh, no, we don't avoid them. We still go camping and all that. It didn't really change none of that.
Oh, good. When you go camping, is it kind of a compromised time, though? Or are you able to enjoy being out there every bit as much as you used to?
We enjoy it, but we're just a lot more aware of our surroundings now.
Oh, I'm sure you are. Some people, basically people, I should say, fall into 2 camps, one of 2 camps. You've got one camp who is just glad as all get out that they have been warned that dogmen are out there by having their encounter. Now they know to take certain precautions to try and quote-unquote protect themselves. There's another camp who would do anything to be able to go back and make it so they never had their experience. They'd rather not know. Which camp do you fall in, Billy?
Definitely the first one, for sure.
So you feel that forewarned is forearmed?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's how I am. Would you rather know Carl or not know?
Definitely the same. I'm on the side of, I'd rather know for sure, like you said, that it's out there and now I can be prepared and kind of, be more apt to look around a little bit extra than not. But, at the same time, still, it wasn't the greatest thing in the world to experience. So, but all in all, I'd say I'm definitely the first as well. I'd rather know it's out there than not know.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't the greatest thing to experience. Yeah, that's a given. From what I understand, Carl, you found something interesting in an abandoned home on a neighbor's property one time when you were a kid. Was Billy with you when you had that experience? And if so, what more can you tell us about that?
Yes. Actually, he was there. And it was actually Billy and our cousin, who was older at the time, was also with us as well during that. And basically, it was our neighbor's house after they both were elderly, and the man actually had passed away, and his wife ended up selling the place, or actually, honestly, she left and had the place up for sale, or just in the midst of almost wanting to sell it or something. But it was a couple of years that it sat over there, and we ended up just going and exploring, being young kids. And we actually found a bunch of books and stuff just laying around, and we found one of them in particular that I thought was cool. It was actually, I still remember it was actually an Atlantis book. I've always been really interested in stuff like that, Atlantis and any kind of cool stuff like that, just mythological stuff or whatever. So I ended up taking the book home, and it wasn't until I got it home that me and my brother actually were looking through it. And at the very end, you know how books have pages of like thoughts or like what you thought of the book or whatever? It was that, but the elderly woman that lived there that had owned it before, it actually put probably a good 3 or 4 pages full of actual sightings that she had on her side of the property of actually the Dogman, saying that my husband had to shoot the gun outside, had to run him off again, at 6 o'clock this morning. It was looking at our horses again, and just account after account, like it was almost a regular basis, it seemed. But yeah, that's the gist of it, of that situation there.
Wow, that's horrible. Did you ever take that book and show it to your parents to basically prove, okay, our experience isn't that far off? This neighbor had experiences with the Dogman as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we did. We actually showed my mother first, and she's very open to stuff like that, you know what I mean, for the most part. So she believed us for the majority. So we showed her first, and then showed my dad later, which I think it took a lot longer for my dad to actually even remotely suggest that it was a real thing. He's more of the old school, if I don't actually see it with my own eyes, I can only believe it so much, kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely know the type, but I'm just glad you had that book to show them. Nonetheless, at least you had that proof. All right, guys, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an idea kind of what the property and everything looks like at our grandparents' house. It's, I guess about total, it's, if I had to guess, roughly about 2 or 3 acres in total with their house and a couple of sheds and stuff. And it's all fenced in. However, only about maybe 1.5 acres of the property is actually open. The rest of it past that is all still mostly woods. And then on the far left side, if you're staring directly at the property, the whole left side is actually all wooded with a decent amount of woods to the left side of it, and then to the very back of the property. And the right side was actually our neighbors, or their neighbors rather, who have probably about 5 or 6 acres total that is all just free and clear for the most part, except for the very, very back. But this was roughly around 97 or 90, I think it was 97 or 98. But I was about 10 years old, and my brother was 7 at the time.
Yep.
And actually, my mother was cooking dinner, and she told me and my brother, she was always doing this, but she would always tell me or my brother to go outside and locate our father, who was always outside working with my granddad and stuff at the time, that it was dinner time. So we ended up just going outside together, walking, and I would say probably about, I'd say about the halfway point of the property. We were walking, talking, just being kids, and then all of a sudden, Billy actually had stopped dead in his tracks, which was strange, because we're little kids. We don't stop for nothing. So that immediately got my attention, and I had stopped, and I turned around and I said, "Hey," I said, what's going on? What are you doing? And he literally said nothing. He just sat there, and I ended up looking in the direction that he was looking and saw what at that given second I thought was actually just a dog kneeled down all the way, kind of just like a dog would be on all fours, kind of laying down, sort of. And so I saw it, and I was like, okay, well, that's weird. What in the world's that dog doing here? My initial thought was that it was our dog. We had a very large Doberman Pinscher, and I had thought it was that because it looked so similar, actually. It was kind of crazy, but the dog was looking out towards the back where my grandfather and my dad was. Now, mind you, also, I definitely got to tell you this. This was also not fully nighttime. This was in the time, it was around 6, about 5:30 to maybe 7, somewhere around that, where it's getting dark, but it's not fully dark. So it was around that time. So mind you, when we seen this, it was very easily identifiable, So we looked, and I don't know exactly if it just heard us or if I said something. I can't really remember, but its ears actually twitched a little, and then it turned its head and looked at us. And when it looked at us, I do remember instantly realizing that, one, its head was actually a lot larger than even our dog's head, which was already big. I mean, he was a big dog. And I also noticed that its eyes were like an amber color, like most people who see this thing say. And then it kind of snarled a little bit, or gave like a low growl, and which, I was a kid, so I was still already scared thinking that this was a dog. But the part that immediately made us both realize that it was not just a dog was the fact that it stood up. And when it stood up on its back legs. And it was huge. Now, my dad is actually a fairly large man himself. He's about 6 foot tall, and at the time, probably 240 pounds easy. So he's a big fella. And this thing was easily a foot or two taller than he was. And just massive. I mean, it was huge. Had huge shoulders, and I don't remember smelling anything, so I don't think that was a thing. But I do remember that when it did turn, or in the process of turning and standing up, it was like its skin and everything was dark colored, like almost black, But it had like, I can't really, it's hard to explain, but it had like, its hair was like almost like a grayish, like a kind of a dark gray, but also whatever light was emanating, still from the sun or whatever, kind of shined off of it. So it seemed like it was even more silver looking. So it was, about, if I had to guess, about 8-9 feet tall. And it actually, once it stood, it turned to both of us and actually kind of reared back a little bit and growled more and showed its teeth. And at that exact time, thank the Lord, our dogs, Major was his name actually, our Doberman, started charging it. I guess it heard us freaking out, or saw it, or I don't know what happened, but it started going after it along with another smaller dog that we had. And once they started chasing it or going at it, it actually had turned back, because it was right just a few feet from the fence. Now, mind you, I also want to tell you that this thing was less than, it was less than 10, about 10, maybe 12 feet away from us when we saw it. So when I say that we saw it, we like were on it, seeing it. I mean, this thing could have very easily just scooped us up and took off, and that would have been it. There would have been there's nobody would have known nothing about it or nothing. I mean, it could have easily done it. Thankfully it didn't, but it actually turned around, and our fence, I guess it's about a 5-foot fence. Yeah, about 5 foot. And this thing jumped, and when it jumped, it kind of used its left leg to kind of push off the top of the fence, like the bar itself, to, I'm assuming, to get more distance or further away quicker. But as it pushed it down, it actually like bowed the part of the fence right there in on that one area, which is actually still there to this day. We never even bothered fixing it or nothing, so it is still just exactly like that right now. But it went through the bushes, and I mean, you could hear it. This thing was so fast, and just, I mean, it was like unlike anything I've ever seen or witnessed ever. And it went tearing through the bushes and knocking down decent sized bushes and trees and all sorts of stuff. And then the dogs had to actually run another good distance, probably basically to the end of the property, before it could cut off past the fence and get through this little hole that they love to go through. And they took off after it. Naturally, me and my brother turned around and went directly back home, ran inside. We were scared and freaked out, and my mom was as well, and she asked us, what in the world happened. We explained it to her. And about that same time, my dad and my grandfather actually come down there too, because they heard all the commotion and the dogs barking and everything and all the stuff going through the trees. And so they come in, we explained it all to them as well. And then both of the dogs actually stayed away all night. I mean, literally until about 2:00 the next day, before they finally showed back up. And I should ask my mom or my dad, but I don't remember them being hurt in any kind of way. I do remember them both being absolutely exhausted. Like they had to have been chasing this thing all day and all night, or most of the night, because they were just wore out. I do remember that much. But I don't believe they were hurt in any kind of way, which was good. But that's about it from my perspective. I didn't know if Billy wanted to add more or anything from his perspective, but that's definitely the gist of it for me.
What do you say, Billy? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. Well, like Carl said, when I seen it and I stopped, this whole encounter only took, I don't know, probably realistically a minute is all it took before it, jumped over the fence. But to me, it felt like it was a 10-minute ordeal, Yeah. It seemed a lot longer, put it to you that way. And, I don't know, I was just, very, very terrified, pretty much is all I could say. At the time, anyway.
Well, I'm sure you were. Yeah, I think that's a given. You told us about how Major and the other dog took off after it, Carl, but did Major seem to be upset at all after he and the other dog came back the next day? You said the dogs didn't seem to be hurt. They were worn out, but did Major seem to be upset?
Yes, yeah, I would say he was, yeah. Another backstory on Major himself. He was actually a police-trained dog before we got him. We actually got him from the pound, and found out later on, after we've had him for a few years, we did some research, and because he actually had one of his toes were missing on, I guess it was his front left leg, and that is actually a sign of, I guess, something they do with canine dogs for the police. So he was, I'm talking, just beyond trained. I mean, you could say sit, the normal stuff you could tell dogs, but you could even go as far as, I don't recommend anybody, especially children or anything, ever doing this, so don't, please. But we could actually go up to him while he was eating, and you could just bend down and grab his food, and he would do nothing but just sit there. I mean, you could tell him to wait, when to eat, when to go lay down, and just anything he would just do instantly. So he's very well trained, and he was also a very extremely protective dog, especially over us kids. He actually at one time broke through one of our windows in another place we lived through a bedroom to fight other dogs that were near us that were, growling at us. So this dog was very, very protective. And I'd say for sure when he got home, when they got back, he was definitely it took days and days for him to get back to normal. Like you could tell it was, and even then, even after he would go outside and stuff, he was more protective. If I'm telling you the truth here, it was like he wouldn't let us even get 5 feet from us. I mean, he would literally walk beside us the entire time after that. He was just he understood, hey, I'm not going to let this thing come near you again, So he was definitely acted different after that for sure.
It sure sounds to me like they named Major correctly. That's a great name for him because he was the real deal.
Yeah, definitely. He was an amazing dog.
He was Major. How far was your dad from you and your brother when you first saw the Dogman, Billy?
Oh, I'm not really sure the exact distance, but he was a good ways from us. We couldn't even see them, so they were way back in the woods working on a car, so.
Yeah, I bet it must have felt like it was 20 miles at the time.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I'll bet. You told us about how most of your grandparents' property was wooded, Carl. Did the woods in their property connect to more woods, though, or was it bordered by open areas?
Yes, actually, towards the back it was. We actually, that was another something I was going to tell you about that we discovered talking to my dad here recently. But yeah, the left side actually, where the thing actually was, standing by the fence and then jumped over the fence, is basically if you say, for instance, it jumped over the fence and kept running all the way left, it would eventually, within about 2 or 3 acres probably, would have ran into a dirt road because our property, there's a dirt road that curves around the property. But if it would have went towards the right and towards the back of the property, it is wooded all back there I truthfully, we used to go back there a lot, but we never really got to the end of it to even find the end. Let's just put it that way. So it was, especially back then. Now not so much. The place has actually gotten more people moved in there and stuff, but back then it was a lot of wooded area. So.
Wow, sounds like that was a good-sized woods back there. You wouldn't happen to know if there was any moving water back in that woods, would you?
That's actually the very, very next thing I was about to tell you, because I actually just watched, I guess, the recent video you guys uploaded with, I can't remember his name, the Australian fellow. But anyways, it was the recent one where you guys were talking about the possibility of, underground caves and water systems and stuff happen to be near these Dogman sightings most of the time. And I actually, up until I just recently spoke to my dad about this, he informed me that there's actually a pond or a lake or something a pretty good ways back behind the property back there that I actually never knew about. I had no idea there was even one back there, but yes, there's actually a lake or something back there that's a pretty decent size, actually.
Huh, if there's a lake, I wonder if it's fed by a spring or if maybe a brook or a stream feeds it, because these guys, just like Sasquatch, they prefer moving water sources. If a lake is all that there is in the area, that's not going to be all that great of a water source for them, because obviously, moving water is going to be fresher than stagnant water like that in a lake. So that does make me wonder.
Yeah, it very well could be.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Billy, the evening you and Carl saw that Dogman, you saw it first. How long had you been aware of its presence before Carl saw it?
Probably just maybe, I don't know, it was only about 10 or 15 seconds, really. And then he wondered what I was looking at, and then he seen it.
Were you so shocked that the idea of bringing it to his attention escaped your mind, or were you thinking about bringing it to his attention when he finally saw it?
No, I was just kind of in shock and couldn't even say nothing, really.
Well, that's understandable. Yeah, you never expect to see something like that, especially 10 feet from you. Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, I was just pretty much frozen there.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. Yeah, no one could fault you for that. Like I said, when you first laid eyes on that Dogman, Carl, it was only about 10 feet from you. Did it ever give you the impression that maybe it was thinking about charging you two when it stood up?
I got the feeling that was a very good possibility because its movement seemed like it was going to do something, but at the same time, I want to think that it was planning on trying to get us or do something, but like I said, thankfully enough, our dog was there, and I can't help but think, though, that if it really wanted to, I mean, being that close, I mean, it wouldn't have took, I mean, just absolutely no time whatsoever just to reach out, grab us, you know what I mean, and just take off, and that'd have been it. And like I said, my mom was in our house a good distance away, and then my dad and my grandpa were so far back there that this thing could have been, I mean, it could have been, miles away before they would have even known that we're even gone, because back then at this time, I'm sure you well know that kids pretty much just stayed outside all day and no one bothered them. And I mean, you're not saying nothing bad about parenting or anything back then, but it was just different times, you know what I'm saying? So there ain't no telling though, but it definitely gave me the vibe that it thought about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, those were different times. Are your grandparents still alive, Billy?
Yeah, they are.
They are. When was the last time you two went to their property?
Oh, I go out there all the time.
I do as well. We actually go up there all the time. Because actually now they actually still live all on the same property. So our parents and grandparents live on the same property there. So we're there quite often. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'm glad that didn't frighten you off. And something I'm sure that's not lost on you guys is the fact that with all the time you spent in the woods, I'm sure that wasn't the first time that Dogman was around you. And if it really wanted to get you, I'm sure you understand it had tons of opportunities to do that. But not once did that Dogman ever harm you. So you can't lose sight of that fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really important to keep in mind. From what I understand, Carl, your dad had another experience with a Dogman. Please tell us about what happened that time.
Yes, actually, the first one, my dad actually had, this has been a good while ago. I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, probably, that this one happened. He'd said that he had a smaller camper that he was like doing some work in stuff in it and trying to get it, just fixed up and whatnot. And he had it parked out near the very end of the property where all the really heavy woods starts. Him and my mother, actually, she was there as well. It was nighttime. I guess they had said it was about 8 or 9 o'clock, and they were heading to the little camper. And when they had come around the corner, something was literally standing, I'm talking right at the very back of the camper, looking into one of the windows. Now, he said that it took off so fast and just, crashed through the woods and bailed, that he is not 100% sure. Like he didn't get to actually see it and confirm that it was a Dogman. However, he said that he said it was massive, whatever it was. He said because and it was extremely fast. He said, so whatever it was way bigger and way faster than anything else that he's seen or heard back there. You got to remember, he's grew up in the woods too his whole life, especially there on that property. He's been there for a good long time. So he's very aware of the stuff that is there, should be there. But the part that bothered me the most about this is, like I said, my dad's a manly dude and, a big fella. So seeing him scared is something that I don't think I've ever personally seen myself. However, he said that he actually got so scared of whatever that was that they actually ran into the camper just because it was the closest thing. And he said that he ended up locking the door and then actually wrapped his belt around the door and then I guess a bar or something that was there to keep it, I guess, more closed. And then just sat there with my mom on the bed holding a gun. And just, he said he's never been that scared ever in his whole life. He said that, and they just sat there for hours and hours until he got the courage to actually just get up and go out there. And he said that what he did was immediately hook the camper up to his truck and moved it back up closer to the road area. And he said that he will absolutely never bring anything close like that to the woods again. So that was the part that bothered me the most, is just hearing him say how scared he was. I mean, that was very, very strange to me.
Yeah, no nonsense guy like that normally doesn't open up like that about experiences, but yeah, I'll bet that experience really did frighten him. How did that affect your mom? Did that really shake her up, or did she take it in stride for the most part?
No, that's the same thing. She actually was very, very scared herself, and she even told me the same thing, because I ended up talking to her about it as well, and she said the same thing. Just, she said she's never seen, my dad that scared of something ever. It was really uneasy feeling to her, because if something happens or whatever, he's the big safe guy, and so it just, it really bothered her too, to be honest with you.
Oh, I bet it did. When you have someone with you that's steely, when you see them start to fall apart, that really does shake you up even more than you normally would have been shaken up. So, yeah, I bet it really did affect her strongly.
It definitely, yeah.
Oh, I'll bet. He's had other experiences with Dogman, or possibly that same Dogman. What more can you tell us about them?
Yes, actually, the other one, which this one is actually one I literally he just told this to me, like I said, less than a couple of weeks ago, and I actually didn't know this up until then. But I guess this one was probably only about a year or two ago. He has a four-wheeler, and actually he has a dog right now that is actually a Great Dane. And he is a huge, huge dog. I mean, big dog. And he's like, my dad's best friend. They go everywhere, anywhere my dad goes, he's got to go with. So he's always with him. And he would get on his four-wheeler and they would ride back in the woods to that lake area that I was telling you earlier about. And he would ride his four-wheeler out there, and Mako is actually his name. Mako would follow him out to there, and they would go out there and Mako would jump in the water and swim around and just, they'd just sit there and just have a little good time, and then they would just come back home. And he said they got pretty used to doing this, and he said that one day he got on the four-wheeler, was heading that way, and that Mako would actually kind of be in front of him, just a couple of feet or something. He would always be in front, though. And for some reason, he said that, and this dog's never done this. Like I said, this is also a dog that's not scared of nothing out there. He is huge. I mean, he's at least 200 pounds. So he's a massive dog. And he just dead stopped in his tracks. Mako did. And just stopped and turned and just, bolted back for no apparent reason at all. No one was calling him. No one was doing nothing. And he didn't stop to wait for Dad. He didn't do nothing. He just literally left. Ran as fast as my dad's ever seen him run, which immediately my dad said that he had a feeling of like almost dread come over him. He said his hair on the back of his neck stood up, and that something told him to immediately stop right there where he's going and turn around and leave. So he said he just whipped the four-wheeler around and just took off back towards the house. And he said when he got back to the house, Mako was literally at the door clawing at it, like pawing at it, trying to get in. So whatever he saw scared him. Scared the wits out of him. Dad said he was like shaking even when he went in the house and was on the couch or whatever, but he was like shaking and, making the noise dogs make when they're scared, whimpering, I guess. But, he said that he was very, very scared about that whole situation. It was just really weird.
Wow, poor Mako. And poor your dad. That's horrible.
Yeah.
How often do you think about Dogman, Billy?
A lot more than I should, I think. Put it to you that way.
Yeah, I can understand why. Have you had any trouble with nightmares?
Believe it or not, no. I have not.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, Carl's already established the fact that this experience affected him more strongly than you, but I was just wondering how strongly it affected you.
Well, to be honest with you, it affected me. I was pretty scared when I was little, but as I got older, I got really interested in it, trying to find out more about it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I do know, and I definitely understand. Anything like that frightens you, the more you know about it, the more you learn, the more comfortable you're going to be thinking about it and realizing that, okay, yeah, we share the woods with all sorts of things that we wish weren't there, but unfortunately they are.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, Carl, from what I understand, you, Billy, and some of your friends had another experience as well. Please tell us about that experience.
Okay, so I guess I was about 16 years old, and me and Billy and two of our really good friends that we had growing up, we'd always go out to my grandparents' house, the same property where all this other lovely stuff has happened. And we would stay at my grandparents just because it was woods. We love woods. We love four-wheelers and stuff like that. So we'd go out there, every other weekend or something like that for a good couple of years and just stay the night out there and just have fun. Well, one particular night we had went and spent the night at my grandparents' house, and everything was just normal up until the point where we had to go in the house and actually go to bed. So we went in the house, we were all camped out on the floor and on the couches and just being teenage dudes, goofing off, giggling and just whatnot, being kids. But we actually were sitting there, and all of a sudden I ended up seeing, actually, wasn't me, it was actually our friend had seen a shadow going back and forth, because in my parents' living room, they got like a window, basically, above the door, and you could see there was like my grandpa's got lights and stuff out there, street lights or whatever, hanging out, and you could see basically shadows if they walked by it. Well, he had said, and he goes, "Hey, listen, I don't know what's going on, but there's definitely something on the porch out there walking back and forth." And naturally, us being teenage dudes, I was like, "Yeah, okay, dude, yeah, let's relax. You're just trying to get us scared or whatever." And he said, "No," he goes, "I promise you, there's something out there walking back and forth." He goes, "Watch." So all of us started to be quiet and just sitting there. And sure enough, we ended up seeing shadow going back and forth. And then eventually the shadow had walked right directly in front of the light, blocking the light through the window, and actually grabbed the doorknob and started shaking it. And I mean, like shaking it a good amount, like trying to get in, which naturally made us all freak out. I instantly jumped up and I went and got my granddad, and he come out, naturally had a rifle with him. We told him, "Hey, there's somebody trying to get in here," which is what we thought. We thought somebody was actually just trying to break in or something. But he went out. As soon as he opened the door, now mind you, this whole thing, from it shaking the doorknob to going and getting my granddad, which was like literally his room was right connected to the living room there. So this didn't take but just a minute or two, from him shaking or whatever the world was shaking the doorknob to getting my granddad up was 2 or 3 minutes at the very most. I mean, it wouldn't even have been long enough for a human being to even run away. You know what I mean? The yard's so big and open, they would have been seen and shot immediately, once he come out. So he went out and he had a flashlight, was looking around and didn't see anything whatsoever. So he ended up just coming back in saying, "You guys are probably just scaring yourselves. There's no telling. It could have been the dogs, could have been this and that, And we were like, there was definitely something there. We're not imagining this. So we ended up laying back down. And when we laid back down, we naturally, it took hours. Probably we didn't even go to sleep until 3 or 4 in the morning, probably. So from I'd say about 10 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning, we were up just constantly listening to whatever in the world was outside, walking around the porch. You could hear it walking around, and it was pretty heavy, and just making noises, weird noises outside and everything. But we finally just went to sleep. So we woke up the next morning and actually to my granddad outside, cussing up a storm and yelling, telling us to get our butts out there. So we all go outside and he goes, I don't know what in the world you guys were doing out here. He goes, but you need to put my propane tanks and stuff back up. We're like, what are you talking about? So we get out and we look, and like by the porch and under the house, it has like this plastic skirting stuff that is attached to it, all through the side and on the porch. And it was all just literally ripped off, every bit of it. I mean, for a good 15 foot was ripped off. And there was a bunch of propane tanks, probably 3 or 4 of them, that were underneath the house there and under the porch that were just slung all around the yard for no apparent reason. And we said, well, we didn't do that. Why in the world would we come out here and tear the porch up and throw your propane tanks on the ground? That don't make no sense. And he said, well, he goes, I don't know, maybe the dog tore it up or whatever. He just, old man, and no nonsense guy too. So he just told us just to fix it. But I was talking to my brother about this recently, and my friend actually, and they both said it's kind of horrifying now remembering it, because then we didn't really think nothing of it until I realized that, that would mean that, I'm assuming it was the Dogman, had ripped all that stuff up so it could come up under the porch and up under where we were sleeping in the living room, and was, I don't know if it was just listening to us or trying to scare us or what, but it was most certainly up under the house, just for whatever reason, which is horrifying to me. I was talking to Billy about it, and that's just, it's bothered me actually since thinking about it.
Well, I can understand why it would bother you. Yeah, the idea of a dogman getting up underneath the house like that's not going to give you the warm and fuzzies. Yeah, it makes you wonder how much time it spent under the house that night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah, well, at least nothing happened, so we can still play the glad game.
Yeah, for sure. And there was another experience we had, once again, actually out near the property at my grandparents' as well. That was actually me, my brother, my cousin, actually from the place from where we found the book. That same exact cousin was with us, and the friend from the last thing I just shared. We're all went out there to stay the night together again. And we ended up about 12 or 1 at night, ended up just walking down to some railroad tracks that were actually near my grandparents. I say near relatively. It was about a mile down the dirt road from them. But we had ended up getting on the railroad tracks, and we're just walking it. And we walked a good, I don't know, half mile down towards where the woods and everything was. And now, mind you, I do realize this is not a smart thing, and I don't recommend any kids or anything doing this at all, but we ended up making a fire in the center of the railroad tracks there, and we're just sitting around goofing off and, just being teenage dudes. And we ended up actually, because there was rocks in the middle of where the railroad tracks were, and we actually started picking them up and just tossing them, just throwing them in the woods, just, seeing how far we could throw them, see if we could hit trees, whatever. And believe it or not, we actually started getting rocks thrown back at us, which was off-putting, to say the least. We're like, okay, well, maybe one hit a tree and just bounced back or something, you know what I mean? So we threw another one. Sure enough, a few seconds later, boom, threw right back at us. So we did it another, 10 times. And each time we would throw them, and we'd make sure to listen, that way it didn't hit a tree or something and it was just bouncing back. And each time it got thrown back at us. So we all went quiet because obviously that was scary. That was a scary experience. And we actually heard something walking around out there, which, abruptly made us quickly put the fire out and just take off running back to the house. But like I said, that was the other little thing that happened there. But it was definitely strange for sure. We all talked about it afterwards, and we're like, you would have to be a very messed up individual to be. We were out in the middle of the woods at 1 o'clock, but there wasn't a whole bunch of people out there other than us. And it would take a very unique, special person to be way out in the woods waiting for people to come out and throw rocks at him to throw them back. You know what I mean? So that was another encounter we were just like kind of dumbfounded about, really.
From the way you described that experience, it sounds to me like it just might have been a Sasquatch that time. It's hard to say for sure. We'll never know, but yeah, it does sound that way to me. Well, gentlemen, it's about time for us to get out of here, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, anybody that is dealing with stuff like this, or if they've seen them themselves, dogmen, it's best to share these, encounters, tell people, whether it's your mom, your dad, your spouse, kids, whatever. It is good to talk about it. And we do very much appreciate you, Vic, for letting us come on here and talk about it and everything. And actually, the funny thing is, it's actually kind of funny, is me and my brother has actually had this ongoing kind of joke, sort of, about, it took a long time for people in our family, because we've shared their story a few times with a few people, and we're like, how long does it have to be for us to stay on this story before people realize we're not lying? You know what I mean? It's from 10 years old, and I'm now 36 years old, and it's literally been the same thing. Same exact story, same everything, same experience, and we've not budged. So, at some point, people just got to start actually believing it, you know what I mean? And they have, but it's been kind of an ongoing joke, because we wouldn't be lying this long.
Well, of course not. I'm glad to hear they finally came around, but it sure is a shame that it took them so long to do so.
Right, yes.
But you'll have that sometimes. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate it too, Vic. Thank you, man.
Yep, thank you for letting us share with you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks again so much, and have a great night.